We all start from somewhere in the world. Before my models used to look like this in Koikatsu, my models looked like that. Much like my previous tutorial, I'm going to talk about making a character. And I don't mean just making a character out of nowhere or trying to design one. I'm more so talking about making it look good. Back then, I definitely coped with the idea that this was how this character was going to look like due to the limitations of Koikatsu. Boy, was I wrong. Turns out Koikatsu's only limitations are your imagination. But nowadays, my characters look so much better, thanks to so many methods I've learned over the years, and honestly, there's not that many tutorials out there. Of course, this is mostly going to focus on original characters and kind of my style of how I do things. So, strap in. Booting up this character maker, we have Chikarin, everyone's favorite starting out character. You'll notice that there is a lot of sliders on the table, and we'll go through almost every single one of them. Some of them are going to be a little out of order, but I will make sure that I talk about almost every single one of the ones that are very important. Obviously, when you're working on the head, you want to zoom in on the head to make sure that things are different. I should also mention that there are secondary sliders. Secondary sliders are pretty much secondary sliders for things that can be increased, decreased, and other things. For the head, there are many different types of sliders. For the head, I usually go with these sliders first and try to make them the same exact values as you see on here. Obviously, the head's not going to look too great from the side profile, which is why we do other things to make sure it looks nice. There's other sliders that you can mess with, but the ones that I'm working with are the ones I usually go for. I turn up the height for the face, so that way I can have the eyes lower or higher whenever I need it to be. For the chin, I usually try to make it as dull as possible because I personally don't like the pointiness of the chin. But I wouldn't turn it to a complete zero because it makes it look like it has a weird cleavage effect. For the nose, I reduce the ridge height so that you can see both more of the eye on a side profile and also so it just doesn't look bulbous. These are the eye sliders. Obviously, if you can't tell from what's being pressed, the eye sliders can change the following: the height and the scale of certain parts of the eyes in general, as well as the eyelashes. You can change the eyeliner color, but some eyeliners are just completely solid. If you saw earlier, Chikarin's eyelashes were only colored on the side, so I usually just go full black for this. For now, I'm just selecting whatever I think is okay for the moment. When it comes to making a character's eyes, I usually try to make the depth go to 20 so that they can poke out from hair as well as poke out from the nose. Also, here's a bit of a tip. If you want to make a character look younger, make their eyes bigger. But if you want to make them look more mature, make them a little bit smaller, but wider. You can see this with a good chunk of my characters, where characters will have smaller irises so that they can showcase that they're older or more mature, while younger characters, or characters that are meant to be very youthful, are usually going to have bigger eyes and bigger irises. Now hold on, I've changed the spacing of these eyeballs, and the sides of her face are looking weird. That's why we go back to the cheeks, and we change the cheekbone width to where it looks like it's a little less stretched in. I know that's a bit of a paradox to say, but that's what I like to call it, stretched in. For the makeup, I tend to turn this off. It doesn't look right to me, unless the character is specifically made to have makeup. Next up is working with the mouth. After fiddling around with the cheeks and the jaw, I usually try to cycle through all the mouths being open to see one huge problem that can occur: clipping. Sometimes, the top row of teeth will clip through the lips and connect with the cheeks. Sometimes, there will be issues with the lips. and they'll just completely obstruct parts of the model. The outlines will just look completely screwed up if that happens. Worst of all, you just might not have a good looking mouth. Next up are the irises. It feels kind of redundant to have the irises and the eyes in the same tab. For this one, I'm just gonna pick a random iris. Here are the colors. The first color and the second color will be determined based off of what you're going to choose for the eye gradient. These are just how they look with these colors and this gradient. And like I said, I'm just picking whatever. Normally, it's okay to just go with the default selection, and that's completely fine. A lot of my characters use that, and even then, it's something that is just completely up to preference. Before we continue, it's very important to note one thing, and that's the X and Y sliders. The X and Y sliders are how I'm getting all these extra sliders that are on the head, the jaw, anything that you see that shows things like scale X, Y, Z. That way you can scale things to your complete liking. Next up is the nose. For my own personal taste, I actually like to do this. Going into makeup, I go to the paint type and type in AE in the search feature. I use this specific shading to give a more standout look for the nose. Next is the hair. See these? Fuck them. No, for real. These hair options are pretty much one of the biggest limiters. And you'll see why in a bit. But for now, bald. Next, we're gonna strip to this girl's underwear, because we're gonna look at the body. And don't worry, no nudity will be shown. Just imagine there's a bunch of body stuff here, including things like plump and muscle, etc. Normally, I use pattern 1 body types because they just mesh better with all the clothes. Here you can see the sample for skin. The presets on the very bottom right are the best for any skin. Just a few of them. Not all of them, just a few. And now, the breasts. I want to point out that this is probably the most important part that I want to talk about when it comes to the body. You see, the breasts are one of the biggest defining features of this game's flaws when it comes to creating characters. You see, these models are specifically polygons that can be stretched out, but not polygons that can multiply, if that makes sense. Over time, you're going to see a lot of the game's flaws thanks to the fact that the bigger you make things and the more you stretch out these sliders, the more you are stretching the model's limits. I don't show it in this video, but here's one of my biggest recommendations. When you're using the regular chest slider, do not go past 100. This actually causes huge issues with the breast model. It's better to use the chest 2 sliders, and if they don't look all that great, you can go back to the chest slider and then look at things like the vertical position, as well as weight, softness, etc., so that it looks perfect. Next is the upper torso. Some of these I don't mess with, like the neck width and thickness, and sometimes the shoulder width. But this time I'm going to showcase something. Shoulder width in this area is different from shoulder width in the arms. I decided to make a stronger girl, so I made her upper torso a little bit wider. Much like the other sliders, there are ways to make certain parts look bigger and thicker, as well as taller in some cases. You can also change where the spine curves, and it's kind of neat, but I rarely ever use it. Next is lower body. You're probably catching on and realizing that over time, we're constantly just changing the size of things as we go down the body, from head to toe. Despite this, there's still some intricacies about this that I should bring up. To begin is the ass. So you might notice that the ass kind of hangs out a bit if you make it too big. There is one easy fix to this. Adjust the size of the thighs to accommodate for the mass of that ass. And I hate that I do have to skip a bit, but this is very important. You can also change the angle of where the ass is pointing. Next is the arms. Remember when I was telling you that the shoulder width and height was different in the upper body area? And this is why. It's genuinely completely different. The upper body sliders for the shoulder seem to change the position, where the arm shoulder sliders actually change the size. I don't know why this is, and I normally don't mess with the upper body shoulder sliders, but just once, for you. In order to make a girl look a little bit beefier in the arms, I only go for a little bit of sizing up here and there. Arms too has a variety of options, but I mostly focus on the arm length. I usually try to change it to where the character is going to have a little bit of space, but not a lot of space. For bigger girls, you want to spread it out further, so that way they're not having their arms clip through their hips. Next is thighs again. For the thighs, there is also more spacing options. I'm just going to have these thighs closed up a tiny bit. For feet, I like to try and make my characters a little bit more unique than most by changing their feet size. And not that much. Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect feet. Never thought I'd see the day I say that. You can also do that with hands. Nails. Something I don't normally put on my characters. Not nails in general, but just the polish. If you want to make them stand out and not look a different color, just simply make it a little bit darker. I usually go for this shade of gray so that they can stand out, but also not look like fleshy figments. Pubic hair, I normally don't work with either, but this should be self-explanatory. Now, I don't normally deal with these other three tabs outside of the skin overlays, but I'll briefly go over them. Genitals lets you change the area of the genitals, obviously, but just the size. If you want to change a character's body type and their actual junk, you can do that in the general tab. And yes, this means you can make women have penises. Or men have vaginas if you're into that. And you might be wondering, hey, what about making a male character? Yeah, so I'm not gonna even flaunt it or anything, but I might as well just release my male characters into the public as a base or something like that, because making a male character is such a pain in this game. Let's just say gender inequality of the worst kind. Suntans are very interesting with how they work. Instead of being a proper tan, what it does is it'll mark certain parts of the body based off of the tan line pattern, and then color a different part of the body. There's some interesting ones here and there that change parts to make them look different instead of just being a tan, like tattoos, or body markings, or for some reason, Sonic the Hedgehog? Okay, sure. And body paint is pretty much like the makeup parts where we saw the nose highlight. But, again, I don't normally do these. Now you might be thinking, what about that last one above slider list? Well, let's go over slider list first. Slider list is the slider list. I don't use this because it just lists all the basic sliders. Not even all of them, just the basic sliders. And body overlays, we'll get to later. This is the outfits section. Looking at push-up, you can toggle a little thing to make it to where women don't have erect poking nipples coming out of their bra. Why isn't this a base game thing? I thank the modders for this game. For now, I'm just gonna stick with this little thing until I find what I'm wanting later. I also decided, at this point in time, it's time to make an Amazoness. Mostly because I want to showcase how to make a bigger girl. I chose whatever colors, but I want to give you a tip about the color picker, my worst enemy. It's not accurate, believe it or not. Whenever you use the color picker, I would prefer it if you actually just memorize the numbers for another part if you want to make it one solid color, and then copy it over that way. And while I'm looking at poses, this is where we have one of our biggest issues that can come with making a character. Noticing mistakes as you go. But that's why you can simply go back and change things as needed. For this Amazoness, I want to make her a bit sporty. I found stirrups that you can't change the color of. And then it makes me wonder, is it in the material editor? You can find a material editor button on pretty much everything. And look at that! The material editor has the material for the stirrups, and you can color it like that. Looks nice. But let's make it brown. I never said I was going to make a good character design. I just said I was going to show you how I make my characters. How I make them look nice on the forefront. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Hair. But in the accessories tab. To make a long story short, in the hair, head, and face sections, there are many hair options. Hair is ported from other games, including Artificial Academy, Custom Made, and even Koikatsu's sequel, Sunshine, as well as Code Vein. You'll probably immediately notice that the character hair might not fit very well due to how these have different meshes. And honestly, going from AA2 to CM3D, yeah, you can tell. But you can also probably tell that there's some weird shading discrepancies. This is where we go into the material editor, go to the shadow color, and I usually go for about 8.7 to 0.9. Then I copy those values and put them on all of the hair options. By the way, there's no limit to how many hairs you can have. In fact, there's no limit to how many accessories you can have either. You can have as many you want. There are some character cards out there that focus solely on the ability to use material editor and all these different shapes to make clothes that don't even exist. To make characters have as much accuracy as possible. And my personal favorite, to be as wild as possible when it comes to being able to flex your skill. Remember when I was saying earlier that people have made Gundam animations? I wasn't fucking kidding. Here's 9-Ball from Armored Core, and it's fully rigged. I wish I was kidding, and I wish I had this kind of skill. Going back to the hair, and I mean the actual hair tab, you can actually change the colors here. There's a few things I want to point out, and that's being able to enable root and tip color adjustment, which allows you to adjust the color of the tip and the root. Some hairs don't have this ability, which one of the ones I'm showing is the custom made ones. There is actually a way to make it to where the hairs can have this detail with the material editor and changing the detail mask. But I'm not going to go over that because I am not that well versed with these types of materials. I was just only able to do it with one character, and I consider it a fluke. Because I wanted to make it an Amazoness and kind of a peppy dancer, I wanted to find a good bangle of some sorts. Something with a bit of a jiggle bone, I guess. And there's the one. And yes, it moves. Not every accessory is going to do this, but I want it on the left arm. Thankfully, I can swap the sides, but it's kind of clipping. So I look at it and try to adjust it to where it won't clip. This is going to be a very common problem when it comes to using the swap sides feature, especially with things that are meant to be for one section only. Just like other games that I mentioned before, even Koikatsu's vanilla hairs are in these hair options. But as a bit of a warning, some hairs might not be colorable because they were made with the intention of being for a specific character. Whether these be VTubers, Genshin Impact characters, or even ported from games like My Hero Academia 1's Justice or whatever the hell. Also, if you ever plan to make any Afro-centric characters, good luck, because I had to dig the internet. I had to excavate for any kind of semblance of these types of hair, and I genuinely forgot where I got them. But I will say, they still exist. They are called Dr. Sloan hair, and yes, the one from Fortnite. I'm not even kidding. There's also another really interesting thing where you can take the hair, back, front, side, etc. from the actual hair tab. There's a mod out there that lets you do this, and not only just with the hair, but also clothes. But that can have its own fair share of problems that I'll show later. Another neat thing you can do is make a character who might have their hair in a ponytail, and have them have the ability to have the ponytail or the hair down with a toggle. Here I have this ponytail, and it's pretty much the perfect kind of ponytail I want for this type of character. Now, something I want to mention about the custom-made hair and maybe other hairs in general is that some of them might not have proper dynamic bones. I always try and shift the head around to make sure that they have the dynamic bones that I want them to. Moving the head around and moving the camera around, you'll probably have already noticed that there's some gaps in between the hairs and the head. Resizing the hair fixes that easily. By the way, this whole time I've had this brown hair as a bit of a placeholder, mostly because for now I was just showing things like the outline and tip color changing, and just wanted to use the base hair until I had a better idea of what I wanted, and to showcase some extra things here and there for the hair tab. Remember when I was talking about the eyes, making the character look more mature? This is pretty much what I meant. But there is one thing you need to worry about, and that's eye closedness. When a character has the ability to close their eyes, they might not have the ability to fully close it if certain parts are completely changed. So that's why I recommended to change the iris height instead of parts of the eyelids height. The eyebrows I didn't mess with until now. Usually I use tensai, because they have a little bit of an outline while having a colorable inside. Eyebrows are completely up to your preference, and for this one, I'm just using whatever looks nice. I normally go a little bit down, and then I rotate them to make her not look so sad. Next is Pregnancy Plus, which, no, she's not going to be pregnant, but it is going to showcase something you can do with stronger women. You can actually make the abs stand out more on the side profile by simply changing how the model looks right here. After a little bit of adjusting with the small chub preset, I'm able to make it look a little bit nicer. And then after that, go to body mesh smoothing so that way the mesh is smoothed out. Next, let's go to the body overlays. I'll prepare a little bit of a folder for you to go with, and I'll explain what all of this means. Body overlays are specifically overlays that are meant for the over part. You'll notice that the character has parts of their body that stand out more when you have these overlays. The face definition makes it look a little bit full, while having this pseudo line even when the outlines are off. Pro Full. This is a special concoction of mine that showcases some body definition while also having a special texture for the lower parts. But we're out of a bit of a problem. Whenever I turn this character's top off, despite having a bra, the bra obviously isn't showing, and because of that, I have to censor this fucking video. And this is why I have something in the settings tab changed, the clothing unlock. That way, some clothes, but not all clothes, will appear despite certain things conflicting. Now, I place a little bit of an underlay, specifically muscle. This makes it to where characters who have muscle not only have more prominent looking muscle, but it makes it look nicer. I have two versions, one for dark skinned characters and one for light skinned characters. Next, I want to talk about the material editor for the body. You see, all this time I've been using something called Vanilla Shaders Plus by Zuckme? The thing about this is that it makes it to where characters really pop out. Dynamic lights actually shine onto them, and there's even extra parameters, like to turn on and off outlines of certain parts of the body, or even certain clothing items. What I want to look at here is the specular lighting, which makes it to where their body looks glistening. Now I want to talk about changing the body. You might have noticed, this is muscle arm. And yeah, those looks like some decent muscles, but there's a reason I don't use them. They aren't really that well implemented. All the clothes have the muscles bursting through. I normally go with profundus. You'll find out what that means if you look under the body and then completely strip her of her clothes. But don't use BP for the character creator, because this is something that's meant more for studio. It stands for better penetration. And I think that's all I'm gonna have to say about that, because this isn't a studio tutorial. Back in hair, I decided to go for a completely different kind of shine. And then, back to the accessory part, with the Vanilla Shaders Plus, I decided to do something a little interesting. Changing the hair color shine, which is genuinely something I didn't realize was possible only with these sliders. Instead of just making it manually the same color over and over again, you can copy the edits that you've made and paste them over to the other hairs. But for things that are like ponytails, you'll want to make sure that all the ones that you do are specifically for the hair. Some hairs have multiple parts. Oh, and because I'm using sunshine, the hair for the front actually does have some tip colors that needed to be changed. Whoops. Now remember when I was talking to you about the clothing options and the accessories? Well, let's add something, like a shirt. Uh-oh. We seem to have a bit of a problem. Her body's kind of messed up now. In fact, yep, it's time again. There's always going to be a universal constant when it comes to making characters in Koikatsu, and that's Japanese game developer spaghetti coding. Because of this issue that's happening and causing a huge wardrobe and also body malfunction, there's only one easy fix to all of this. Simply get rid of the shirt, save the character to a new slot, and then load it. That way, everything is hunky-dory. Or you can simply change the clothing slot and then go back to the old clothing slot you had. Hooray! Everything's fine now! Next part is the advanced bone mod. For this Amazonian character, I want to make her upper torso a little bit wider. So, using that specific part of the coordinates, I do just that. Do be careful when you change some of these because some things might not change on the surface. You might have noticed the head jitter around a bit. Going back to the height, let's change that to a toasty little 200. Oh, that's a stretched out model. Wow. Well, thankfully, there is a fix for this. I do want to make her a little bit this tall, and with those little body scales down there, I can easily scale the model while it still has that type of a body. And bam, she's as tall as I want her to be. The measure bar is a very wondrous thing, but it is in centimeters, so if you ever need to convert something from centimeters to feet, Google's your friend. So not only does the bonemode editor actually allow you to edit parts of the body, it can also allow you to edit accessories. And here you can change parts of the hair. Hair tends to have multiple bones, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to show you what it looks like to edit it. Also, you might have noticed this little yellow text that says to use a different type of offset for each slot. You might want to tick this off for the body, but if you're using different hairstyles for different accessories, or different accessories in the same slot, keep this one on, because it will change it for every accessory on that slot. And especially for the body, you will want to make sure that this is off, so that way the body is always the same and consistent throughout each and every clothing option. The in-school and gym uniform and all of that. Some extra bonemode edits include changing the waist area to be a little bit slimmer, and changing the mouth corners to smile a bit more. The base smile honestly doesn't look all that happy, especially when it's on the default. Changing it a little bit makes it to where not only it keeps some of the base expressions for other emotions, but it also just makes the basic face that you normally see look a lot happier. Now, something I completely forgot to mention in the beginning is the general tab for the faces, and that's the head mod. Head mod not only shrinks and gets rid of parts of the head that are unnecessary, it also just makes it look a lot better. There's also the head mod 2 that allows for different emotions, but it can have some huge conflictions if you've already modified the head a lot, so I normally just make every character of mine the basic head mod. I cycle through pretty much all of the eyes and mouths and everything else to make sure everything is looking fine. Next, something I'm sure you can do is making a custom shirt. Let's take this Striker's Bowl shirt. Let's just add some basic text. Final Heaven sounds cool. Sounds like something of a name of a band. I decided to go with the Edo font. And then I just overlay it over here. And now you have two options. You can get rid of the Striker's Bowl team part and make it a brown shirt. Or you can make it transparent. That way you can change the color and keep the cool new design. But the reason why I use the Striker Bowl shirt is because I want to have a template of where I'm going to be putting this logo. After that, I have another idea. What if I wanted to make this a little bit cropped? What if I wanted to show some tummy and some more shoulder? What if I wanted to make her look cooler? Well, I'm not going to immediately change the hide base texture tech because it's just going to show her tits again. Now, with it loaded, we can see she's become a Rayman character. And this is where the alpha mask comes into play. Let's load up the alpha mask into GIMP, which is what I use for all of these edits. See all the green color? That is pretty much any part of the body that is not going to be shown. And the same goes for the black parts. Anything that isn't yellow is going to be shown. Over here are the arms and the shoulders. And then on the left side are the torso and the back. Let's showcase what this looks like re-implementing the shoulder and the arms. Simply load the alpha mask, and it looks moderately better. There's some minor clipping on the shoulders in certain poses. But we still have her body cut in half. So what we do is use the square tool, paint it yellow so that the skin can be exposed again. It may take some trial and error. As long as you export it, it will reload it if you have a specific setting put on, and the more you do it, the more you'll notice it will come back into play. It might be hidden for a little bit, but that's only if you look really close. And what we're worried about is making sure that the base of the skin is completely visible, not the really nitty-gritty parts. Next is possibly my least favorite part about making a character, and that's the sailor uniform and the blazer. These are options that let you have coats over shirts or suits over shirts, but not all of them are fully compatible. This requires a lot of things that are out of my expertise, and honestly, sometimes it breaks more than it can fix if you try to implement that. Again, more alpha mask fuckery. There's also patterns. Patterns can help a lot when it comes to trying to figure out where things are in an overlay. Most of the time, because almost every other overlay for a shirt or something is going to be a huge blob of one color. It's why I used the Strikers Bowl team shirt to make that Final Heaven t-shirt, so I could use the logo as a bit of a guiding point of where I had to put the new logo I wanted. Next is changing an accessory's parent. This is where you actually can change a part of an accessory and where it goes. A bit of a note, not every accessory has this option because it's pretty much anchored onto a part of the body. But this is honestly less than 5% of all accessories. I'm using this belt as a bit of a choker. There's already chokers in the game, but I wanted to use this one because I felt it'd be cool to have a belt choker. That sounds really bad. You know what? No, I just used the belt to showcase what it was like to make something on a different parent. Center of neck makes it to where anything on the neck is just centered on the neck. But if you have it set to neck, the neck will actually have the accessory move if the head moves. And now that we have this character set in stone, let's call her something simple, like Cece. Bam. But we're not done yet. Let's talk about making a bigger girl. This is pretty much going to be a showcase of how to make someone that's a bit on the heavier side. This part is going to have very light commentary, as it's just me messing around with some more sliders. You might have noticed that the Pregnancy and Pregnancy Plus sliders were touched a little bit, and that's just pretty much to showcase what sliders are used and what they do. I wouldn't recommend doing this immediately, but I will say this is pretty much something I'm known for. On top of that, there are plenty of other sliders you can mess around with when it comes to making a bigger girl. But this is pretty much the general gist of it. And I'm not exactly proud of how I made this edit, but yeah, this is pretty much how someone can make a bigger girl and make it look halfway decent, I guess. I'm still not too confident in the things that I make when it comes to bodies, especially for some of the girls that I make that are bigger. I should also mention that I have some body overlays for fatter women, specifically things like fat folds, and even some normal maps for cellulite. Normal maps can be loaded with the material editor on the body, and it's pretty much showcasing what's reflective as well as certain details you normally wouldn't see without dynamic lighting. On the Pregnancy Plus side of things, you can change parts of the belly so that way it looks a little chunky, but also has some folds. And for the face and cheeks, I make them look a lot fuller, and change the depth so that the hair can still be in the same direction it is, while not sacrificing the fullness of the cheeks. With this, I thank you for watching, but most importantly, do check the description for any downloads that I have in the bottom. It's going to be a really good resource for people who really want to get into heavy editing for their characters. See ya.